Helen, approaching her 56th birthday, reflects on the journey of resilience and strength that followed the loss of her beloved husband to cancer 5 years ago. While the pain of his absence was deep, she gradually adjusted to the solitude of her life without him. Her husband, a successful businessman, had always been a steady source of support. Their love story, which began unexpectedly through a mutual friend, blossomed into a life filled with shared joy. They raised their son, Kevin, when Helen was 24, and their daughter, Laura, followed 6 years later. One day, Helen returned home to find her room unnervingly pristine but entirely emptied. Her daughter-in-law, Kathleen, with a laugh and no trace of regret, casually explained that she had cleaned out the room for the betterment of the household. In confusion, Helen followed her gaze to the backyard, where she saw her belongings, including a treasured painting from her late husband, being devoured by flames. Kathleen, with her cruel words, called Helen a parasite, suggesting that she no longer belonged in the home. Devastated by the betrayal, Helen chose to leave the house that had once been her sanctuary. Yet, despite the overwhelming hurt, she made a vow never to forgive Kathleen and swore to never forget the harm done. This pivotal moment set Helen on a new course, one where she would lean into her inner strength and hold on to the memories of her late husband to forge ahead. As a devoted homemaker, I had always believed in the value of hard work, and my husband shared that belief. He recognized my efforts, and together, we ensured that our family was financially secure. But life has a way of throwing unexpected challenges our way. One day, Kevin announced he'd be returning home for a short break from work, and I was overjoyed at the prospect of seeing him again. But when Kevin arrived with the simple words, "I'm home," I quickly realized my oversight. Kathleen, his wife, was with him. My relationship with Kathleen had always been difficult. She frequently belittled me, making biting comments even before their marriage. Though I greeted her with a polite smile, her smug grin told me everything I needed to know. They intended to stay overnight, though I had no prior knowledge of this plan. Their 3-day visit left me emotionally drained, and my hope for a peaceful return to normalcy began to fade. A few weeks later, Kevin had a conversation with me that raised alarm bells. He hesitantly told me that Kathleen wanted to move in with us. She claimed it was for my well-being, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more about her than about me. Kevin tried to reassure me that their relationship was fine, though his tone suggested uncertainty. I couldn't burden him with this issue, so I decided to speak directly with Kathleen. I hoped a straightforward refusal would make her back off. That night, I reflected on the possibility of living with Kathleen, recalling how she had previously treated our home as if she were assessing it for her own use. My decision was clear: living with her was simply not an option. I needed to act swiftly and decisively. The following day, I called Kathleen to discuss her proposal. She was eager, as though she'd already planned our shared future. When I told her I wasn't interested in living together, there was a noticeable pause, her surprise evident. She suggested that it would be beneficial for me as I got older, but I assured her that I was perfectly content on my own. I thought this would end the matter, but unfortunately, peace was short-lived. A few weeks later, Kathleen arrived unannounced with a new idea: a trial period of cohabitation. Without waiting for my consent, she started to make herself comfortable, outlining her plan as though it were already decided. I couldn't help but wonder if Kevin was even aware of her latest attempt. When she called him in front of me, he apologized for her forwardness, suggesting a compromise. Agreeing to the trial might help Kathleen realize that it wasn't feasible. Reluctantly, I agreed, knowing the situation had already gone too far. At first, the arrangement seemed manageable, but as Kevin became more absorbed in his work, the household duties fell solely to me. With Kevin away on a business trip, the responsibility of managing daily life rested entirely on my shoulders. Though I had my reservations, the new reality was set, and I braced myself for the challenges that lay ahead in this strained living situation. As soon as Kevin left for his business trip, Kathleen's behavior changed dramatically, revealing a side of her I had never seen before. During one of our meals together, she mockingly criticized my cooking, comparing it to dog food with a cruel laugh. Her veneer of politeness had completely vanished. Her complaints grew more frequent and petty. First, about the laundry, she insisted I wash her clothes separately, claiming they would smell like an old lady otherwise, and sighed heavily as though it were a huge inconvenience. Then, without offering to help with anything, she casually announced plans to meet up with friends and left the house, leaving me to handle everything alone. I reached my breaking point when Kathleen's behavior became intolerable. I warned her that I would talk to Kevin about her actions, hoping it would make her reconsider, but Kathleen remained stubborn, telling me she was staying with us out of the goodness of her heart, a statement that left me bewildered. Given her behavior, her defiance reached its peak when she threw a picture frame at me, a photo of my late husband and me, showing just how little she cared for anything but herself. After that, I couldn't hold back anymore. Kevin promised he'd return soon to discuss everything in detail. 5 months into this increasingly strained living arrangement, I finally decided to talk to Kevin about ending it. He seemed unsurprised, agreeing immediately and confirming that his return was imminent. Just 5 days before Kevin was set to come home, another unexpected turn came. My daughter, Laura, arrived unexpectedly. Her sudden return signaled yet another shift in our already tumultuous lives. Laura had come home because her marriage had ended, her husband had cheated on her. With everything happening at once, I quickly offered Laura a place to stay. You're welcome to stay here as long as you need, given what you've been through, I told her, though I felt the need to brief her on the complicated situation with Kathleen. Yes, Kathleen's been staying with us, I explained. Kevin will be back soon, and we'll sort things out then. Laura nodded, understanding the delicate nature of the situation. I might be new to all of this, but I'll help out as much as I can, she reassured me. Her support was a welcome comfort in such a challenging time. When Kathleen returned home and saw Laura, she asked about her presence. Laura simply explained that she'd be staying for a while due to personal reasons. Interestingly, Kathleen seemed to take an immediate liking to Laura, possibly seeing her as a sister figure because of Laura's age. This unexpected connection between them hinted at a potential shift in the dynamics, offering a glimmer of hope for a smoother coexistence. The day Kevin returned, however, was another test. Kathleen rudely shoved past me at the door, continuing to show a complete lack of respect. We all sat down for dinner, a rare moment of calm with Laura, who had been away for so long. To my surprise, Kathleen seemed in a better mood, though she drank more than usual. Despite our warnings that she was drinking too much, Kathleen insisted she was fine and even pressured me to join her, despite my aversion to alcohol. As the night wore on, Kathleen's behavior grew increasingly erratic due to her intoxication, and Laura eventually helped her to bed. With Kathleen finally asleep, the rest of us saw an opportunity to discuss the future of our living arrangement. We agreed that it was time to end Kathleen's stay with us, a decision that needed Kevin's agreement since she was his wife. That conversation felt like a turning point. We knew it wouldn't be easy to address the tension Kathleen's presence had created, but it was necessary for the well-being of our household. We also had to consider Kevin's feelings and how this would impact his marriage. It was a delicate balance between maintaining family unity and setting boundaries, one that made me realize how much I had allowed the situation to spiral out of control. I sat in quiet contemplation, uncertain of the best course of action. It felt as though we were all trapped in a standoff, unable to find a way forward. Time passed, and the tension remained, until Laura finally broke the silence with a question that none of us had thought to ask. Why did Kathleen want to live with us in the first place? That question stopped me cold. Despite all the discomfort and frustration Kathleen's presence had caused, I realized I had never directly asked her, or Kevin, for her true motives. When I pressed Kevin for an answer, he could only recall Kathleen vaguely expressing concern for my well-being, though he admitted he found it hard to believe her sincerity. He speculated that perhaps Kathleen had been eyeing our large house, an idea that seemed even more plausible given her actions both before and after moving in. Laura then suggested a plan we hadn't considered before. It was a bit bold, and I wasn't sure how I felt about its implications for me, but as I thought it over, I saw that it might just be the breakthrough we needed to end the standoff. Encouraged by Laura's initiative, we decided to proceed with the plan, keeping it a secret from Kathleen for the time being. 3 weeks later, we were ready. Though we knew Kathleen might reject our approach, we agreed to face the issue head-on. Together, we set a date, 3 days away, for our plan to unfold. The day before we intended to confront Kathleen, I told her I would be stepping out for a few hours but would return by evening. To my surprise, she responded with a cheerful, "Elle must toucher full" attitude. I found it strange but didn't give it much thought, focusing instead on the upcoming shift in our living arrangement. My only concern was leaving Kathleen at home alone. Given the sensitive nature of the situation, this was the moment we'd been waiting for, a chance to finally address the elephant in the room and resolve the tension once and for all. I went out to meet a friend I hadn't seen in ages, momentarily forgetting the weight of the situation back at home. When I returned around 7 p.m., I was greeted by Kathleen, my son's wife, emerging from my room. She casually claimed to have cleaned it for me, an innocuous enough statement, but one that immediately raised alarms. Confused, I entered my room to find it completely empty. Kathleen, laughing without any hint of remorse, told me she had done it for the good of the house. My heart sank as I followed her gaze to the yard and saw my belongings, including a precious painting from my late husband, engulfed in flames. Kathleen's face twisted with malice as she told me that she was getting rid of the parasite. It was clear to me then that her intentions were no longer just to disrupt my life, they were about erasing me altogether. In that moment, I made the decision to leave, not just the house, but the toxic environment she had created. As I walked away, her last words, questioning whether I was okay with leaving, echoed in my mind, the smugness in her voice unmistakable, even without seeing her face. I immediately called Kevin and Laura, telling them that I was moving to the new house sooner than planned. It was time for a fresh start, free from the chaos Kathleen had brought into our lives. I looked forward to reuniting with my family in a place where we could finally have peace and rebuild. Settling into the new house brought a sense of relief and anticipation for the future. When Kevin and Laura arrived, they were amazed by the size and beauty of the place, asking how I had managed to find it. I explained that it had come through a connection of their father's, a friend who had informed me about the house. It reminded me of our old home, so I didn't hesitate to make it ours. As we settled in and spent time together, the conversation turned more serious. We agreed that it was time to share the new address with Kathleen, knowing she would eventually find out and come knocking, given her persistent nature. The day after we made the decision, Kathleen's messages and calls began to flood in. A few days later, she showed up at our doorstep, looking worn out and confused. With Kevin and Laura by my side, I felt a sense of reassurance. Kathleen's confusion was evident as she questioned why we had chosen to live in such a luxurious place. Her inquiry led us into the living room, where the long-awaited confrontation was about to unfold. Kathleen was visibly taken aback by the scale of our new life, as though she had assumed she might somehow be included in this new chapter. Her smile faltered when Laura made it clear that the living arrangement was meant for us alone, with no room for her. The shock on Kathleen's face deepened as we explained the reasoning behind her exclusion, her blatant disregard for my feelings, and the destruction of my most treasured possessions. When we suggested that she might have been after the house or money, Kathleen's silence spoke volumes. It confirmed everything we had suspected but hadn't been able to prove. This was a turning point for us. It reinforced our decision to leave her behind, focusing instead on rebuilding our family in a place of peace, free from the toxicity she had introduced. As Kathleen stood there, questioning the lavishness of our new home, she seemed incredulous that we could maintain such a lifestyle without relying on Kevin. That's when Kevin set the record straight, revealing something Kathleen clearly hadn't understood. Throughout their time living with me, I had covered all the living expenses. Kathleen's shock was palpable. She first denied it, then tried to shift tactics, suggesting that we could start fresh together in the new house, that perhaps there was still room for reconciliation. I couldn't help but find her sudden change of heart amusing. Her attempt to regain favor was both laughable and sad. With a firm but gentle grip on her hand, I told her bluntly that it was she who had been the true parasite, and that it was time for her to reflect on her own actions. Kevin's decision to side with me in this moment was a powerful one. Kathleen's desperate attempts to sway him fell apart as it became clear that even her husband could no longer justify her behavior. When she learned that the house, this one she had hoped to share, was solely in my name, her last semblance of hope vanished. The outburst that followed was a fury of frustration and desperation, so intense that we had no choice but to call the authorities. As the police arrived and took her away, her furious glare lingered, but in that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Justice, however small, had been served, especially for the memories of my husband that she had so